Hotel family, it's your brother Beniti. I'm in Ray, back for another post. We're going to talk about this week, kind of preparing for this Thursday night show with Brother Panic, just to let everybody know. Brother Panic will be back on the show this Thursday, and also to let the listeners know that we will have Dr. Jewel Pookrum on August 13th. She'll be back on doing a whole series on neuromelanin and the circuits of the brain, the multiple different brains that exist within us. But what I kind of want to elaborate on leading up to the show this Thursday, I kind of want to talk about spiritual magic, what they call black magic, white magic / Wicca. Is another term for white magic, witchcrafts, things of that nature. I want to talk about those things because it's a topic amongst melanated people, even people that are conscious, still kind of spooked out about this topic because they don't really know how to put it into perspective. And I'm going to show and explain how this would be the solution to the problems that we're facing, especially the solution for melanated people. Now, sorry to say, I tried to upload. We did a great lecture last night, myself and my son, down in Miami. We were recording it, and for whatever reason we went to upload it. It didn't upload. It was recorded, captured, but when I went to upload, it just didn't transfer over. It got lost. I don't know if that was intentionally. Maybe the spirits of the ancestors didn't want the class uploaded. I don't know. It just didn't upload. And it was a powerful class. I really wish it got captured, recorded, and uploaded because it dealt with the topics we're going to kind of touch on. But for whatever reason, that class got lost. It is what it is. And my intuition tells me it just wasn't meant to be. So having said that, so what we're going to be dealing with this Thursday, we've been talking about how we see with all the different events going on in the news, the psychic and the psyche trauma it's having on individuals / melanated people. When I talk about the things in the news, we're talking about all these so-called racially motivated police incidences that they seem to be publicizing just about every other day now. You have terrorism. You have all types of things that are playing off the human emotions that it's having an effect on some people. Not people that are spiritually in tune and doing what they're supposed to be doing. We're more or less talking about people that are not preparing themselves and are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. As I've said before, they're intentionally publicizing these things, and as I've said before, people are acting like this is something new. As far as the police brutality and the things that you're seeing, this is nothing new. This is something that's always been going on. And like I've explained, now with social media and cell phone cameras, it's being captured in real time and it's being uploaded on a regular basis. So now you're seeing it. But somebody intentionally is focusing on these things. Like I've also said before, while this is going on, and I related a story on a radio show, and I believe I might have related it on one of the last two posts. You had on 4th of July a gang member shooting at another gang member. These are two melanated males, and in that process, the one gang member that was being shot at was holding his 7-year-old son, and the 7-year-old son got killed in this exchange of fire, and nobody's talking about that. And the reason why I said that is because it's black on black crime and nobody cares. It doesn't sell, it doesn't make money. You don't see Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson over there protesting black on black crime. But as soon as it's a black on white incident, there's money to be made. So all these coons and buffoons show up and they want to have marches and protests, and we shall overcome, all this mammy and pappy shit. That will never work for us. Okay? Because there'll be a protest and a march, and then everybody goes back to doing what they were doing originally. Now, we see things are escalating, obviously, and they're going to a whole different level. Now, I want you to reflect back and look at when 2012 happened. Prior to 2012, how everybody was spooking 2012 out, and everybody thought it was going to be some apocalyptic doomsday. And for those that know me and have known me for well over 20 plus years, know when I was teaching on this years back, it was always taught going into the Mayan prophecies and the Dresden Codex of the Mayans, and in the Temple of Hathor and the Dendera calendar. This was always recorded in the genealogy logging of our ancestors as a great shift in spiritual consciousness. The real educated scholars and teachers knew this long before they started talking about 2012 just a few years back. So 2012 got promoted as some fanatical end-of-the-world doomsday apocalyptic event. And then right prior to 2012, what do the powers that be do? They make a movie called 2012, sensationalizing it even more to prey upon your emotions and your fears. But if you reflect back to what happened and what was really 2012 real quick, and I'm not going to make this a 2012 class, but this ties into the spiritual magic and the things that we're going to update it with and talk about in a few minutes. There were the magnetic poles of the planet shifted, creating a great shift in energy on the energy grids of the planet, and also a great shift in energy spiritually, mentally, emotionally in physical beings or human beings, especially melanated people. The magnetism, or these magnetic poles that absorb the energy, have now shifted, and they are now taking in more energy just like we are. So you're seeing a rising and escalation in human behavior in the sense that those that have been preparing themselves are able to ingest this energy, okay? And they're actually making this transition and change with nature and with the spiritual transformation, as opposed to those who are not. And unfortunately, some of these individuals would be going what we would term out of their mind, and some of them just can't handle the influx of energy. So you have people like this clown last week that walked into a movie theater in Lafayette, Louisiana, and just started shooting up the place. Yeah, the other nut a few years back that did it in the Batman movie. There's been many incidences. But the point I'm trying to get you to focus on, this is escalated, if you really think hard, from 2012 to present day, a whole nother level. So we're up against all these psychological, emotional, and spiritual problems. What's the solutions? Okay, as I've said before, a lot of organizations, spiritual organizations, and I gotta call it for what it is, whether it's the Moors or the Black Hebrew Israelites or the so-called Nubians or the Nation of Islam. All they want to preach is hate the white man rhetoric, and they want to sit there and tell you what the white man did to you, the white man this, the white man that, and nobody's offering any solutions. I also made a reference last night into the lecture that I did. Let's go back to 1995-96. when the Million Man March was done. Okay? On the surface appeared to be a great event. Right? 1 million people gathering, so-called melanated people gathering, and it supposedly made such a great impact. Really, when you break it down and look at it, it didn't do absolutely nothing. Here you are complaining about an individual called the European or the white man, and you gather a protest in his backyard where he is controlling the environment and the conditions of the protest. So it's kind of like a crumb falling off the master's table, but creating the illusion that something actually got accomplished or done. Now, regardless of how you feel about the Million Man March and what you think the impact of it was, that's your own personal opinion. But the statistics and the facts show, when we see the condition that we're in today, as a whole, it did absolutely nothing. Okay, and that's just bottom line. It might have did something for the moment at that time, but in the long haul, it didn't change anything. If we reflect back on our spiritual magic, okay, and this is what I want people to reflect on, people that study or claim to study spiritual consciousness, Egyptian and African history, things of that nature. We have to really reflect hard and think. Regardless of what slave trade you study or research, the east coast of Africa, the west coast of Africa, the Arab slave trade, the Portuguese slave trade, regardless, anytime melanated slaves were brought to this country from Africa, Nubia, etc., the first thing that they took from us, and they made sure that this is what they did, was our language, our culture, all of the things affiliated and associated with our culture, our ritual, our practices, the things we did to connect us with our ancient ancestors, and of course one of the main tools or implements they took from us was the drum. We also, as you know, if you've researched history, which is basic information, there was a drum that we had amongst us called the talking drum. The reason why it was called the talking drum was because literally there were certain patterns, rhythms, and beats played where it actually literally was a form of communication, and the individual was able to decipher those beats and patterns and translate it to what it actually meant. So any of our cultural and ritualistic systems they took away from us. We don't focus on that enough because most people are trying to over-intellectualize what the problem is. They get into these debates of history, dogmas, doctrines, who is right, who is wrong, what was first, what was last. In the scheme of things, it does absolutely nothing. I bring this up because, let's go back to the Million Man March event again, and why I brought that up. I brought that up because just think if we were to gather 1 million melanated people somewhere and gather them in a serenic place in nature, and we were to perform certain mantras and chants and played certain drum rituals, the effect that we could have not only on ourselves but on the magnetic grid and the grid of the planet. It would literally change the energy of the planet. It would literally change the vibration and the frequency. And when the vibration and the frequency and the energy is shifted in your favor, the majority of that energy that's being propagated out into the atmosphere or to the masses would be able to be the ruling authority. We would be able to change things automatically, physically. We're not talking about converting people over to a certain doctrine or dogma. We're talking about changing the vibration, frequency, and energy. And this is why I've explained you cannot go to war or go to a battle or a gunfight with a butter knife. So you have people on the surface, to my so-called revolutionary brothers, that have been screaming revolution for years, and I've been around doing this for over 25 years now, 27 almost to be exact, and I've seen them come and go over the years. I've heard every nutcase and fanatic scream revolution. Some I know are still around, still screaming the same old revolution, revolution, and again, you've heard me say the last couple of weeks, if that's the case, stop talking about it and just go doing it. What are you waiting for? Are you waiting for somebody to lead you into this revolt? I'm confused. All I hear is talk, talk, talk. If you're going to do it, go do it. And don't say there's time to wait for anything. You have enough of things that's going on in front of you. You see it in the news. What are you waiting for? So don't tell me you're waiting for the right time, because the time is now. And I'm saying that because I'm not saying I agree with that ideology, because I don't. I'm just trying to prove a point that it's ridiculous and it's not the correct way to go about doing what we need to do to handle some of these problems and these solutions. Every problem has its roots spiritually. You heard me talk about that. You heard us talk about on a radio show also, anytime when you look into the history of melanated people that there was a battle or a war we went into, there was always a ritual enacted before it. There was always some type of preparation. There was always something done spiritually before that was enacted. We never just went out on the front line, not mentally and spiritually prepared. So this is the point that I'm trying to bring out to show you as an example. Every problem has its roots spiritually first before you deal with the physical. But you have people keep focusing on the physical and over-intellectualizing nonsense. Okay? So if we were to gather that mass amount of people and per se do specific mantras, the magic that we could create, and magic is just manipulating and transferring the elements into your favor. These are the higher sciences that we practice, and when we were in that state of mind, Nobody was able to mess with us. Now, the topic of black magic, which I don't even like that term, or what they call white magic or Wicca, really what is that in essence? Okay? You see today predominantly, not that you don't have melanated people that practice Wicca, but you see predominantly people that practice Wicca are more of the European nationality or persuasion. Now, when you trace the origins of what we call Wicca, or witchcraft, or whatever you want to term it or call it, the many titles that it's been given, even when you trace it back to who you call the Celtics, the Celts and the Druids were actually melanated African people, the original Celts and the Druids. That's still in a system that belonged to us. But just like every other system and every other religion, usually what happens is the European gets his hands on it, he waters it down, and he changes it, and he fits it to his pattern and his systems. We have to stop separating in this aspect too, like we do with religion. Magic is just magic. There's no such thing, and let me clarify this, other than human beings titling it and classifying it so they can label it to make them feel comfortable. There's no such thing as black and white magic and all these other different titles we're giving it. It's just different degrees of vibration and energy. Now, unfortunately, when one hears the word black magic, ancestral worship, etc., most people have been programmed already. The mind triggers off to negative connotations about magic. It's devil worship, it's voodoo, it's this, it's that. Religious people freak out and get scared, but they really don't understand the origin of it and really what it is, because again, it's something else that's gotten labeled by mainstream society as something negative. But when we were practicing this and working it correctly, nobody was able to mess with us. We were always in our right frame of mind, and things were always prospering, because we had that divine connection by way of our neuromelanin to send out and receive these frequencies and manipulate the energy and work the spiritual magic we needed to work to get things done. As soon as we vacated this and were forced into taking on other religions and cultures, then things went amok for us. Most of us were forced into becoming Muslims, Christians, and Jews by way of these slave trades, and we were forced into worshiping spook gods that aren't real and don't even exist. And instead of calling upon our DNA and bloodline ancestors, our guardians, those connected to us by blood, we started calling upon spook and spirit forces that didn't even exist. We started giving our power and energy over to deities and gods that were not affiliated with us. By us calling upon them, we were giving strength to the enemy. Now, unfortunately, in this day and time, there is no excuse. You still have people that are serving the slave master's religion, unfortunately. They are continuously staying in these dogmas and these religions and these faiths, and some knowingly the truth, but some afraid of knowing the truth. So this poses a problem, because our energy is being focused on something that's not real, and it's giving life to spirit gods and spook gods that keep the enemy in power. And we simply want to know what's the problem. I mean, what's the solution? The solution is, number one, to get away from those religions and dogmas. And the solution isn't going into a black version of it that's sprinkled with Afrocentricity, which would be the black Hebrew Israelites, who ridiculously use the King James Version of the Bible and then come with ridiculous non-historical facts that King James was black, which is convenient because then they don't have to come up with their own translation of the Bible. As long as the black Hebrew Israelites have been around, how come they don't have their own Hebrew translation of the Bible? That's because most of them don't speak Hebrew. They speak pieces of Hebrew and fragments of Hebrew, and they always got some slick answer why or how much they need to know or why they need to know, and they never give you the full explanation of it. So it's easy just to say King James was black, so now that justifies you as a black person or a melanated person using the Bible, which to me is funny as hell and comical. Okay, then you have the Nation of Islam, who sit there and tell you the white man is the devil, and they have now just taken the Arabs' version of their religion that's been corrupted, and now want to put you right back into the same mindset under spook gods, but sprinkle it with Afrocentricity, which is comical, because if you study the Nation of Islam, you see the person they claim who's Allah in the personage of Master Farad Muhammad looks like a British Caucasian. And they claim that the white man is the devil, this and that, but yet the God they venerate and worship looks like a Caucasian. He looks almost 100% white. He looks British. I mean, he looks 50 times more lighter and whiter than myself, who was of mixed origin or mixed descent. This is comical. Yet they want to tell you the white man is the devil. That's funny as hell to me. But yet the same God, as I've said in the past, that they're recruiting you for, who they claim is the original black God, all these black organizations, okay, their God is the reason why they're in the condition and the problem they're in. And that reason and condition and problem that they're in is the white man, because their God allowed the creation of the white man. And still to this day, nobody's given me a logical explanation of why the black supreme God allowed the creation of the white man. Why did he allow it to exist? Because if he didn't, we wouldn't be in this situation. And all I keep getting are the same ridiculous answers of how genetically they believe the Caucasian or the white man was created. That's not the question I'm asking. I'm not asking you to give me your version of the Yaqub story and the lessons. I'm not asking you to give me the Canaanite story or the Flugerod story. These are just your mythological interpretations of how you think the Caucasian came about genetically. I'm not asking you the theory on how he came about genetically. The question I'm asking is why, or what was the purpose that the Supreme Black God allowed this creation to take place? Because this is the God that you're recruiting me for. And I'm pointing that out again because this is the reason why we're in the condition we're in, the mind state. So the solution is not going back into these religions and sprinkling it with and covering it with Afrocentricity and black concepts, because that's basically all these organizations do. It's putting us right back into that same mind state of religion and ignorance. Okay? It's also, the solution isn't some people who get caught up in spiritual consciousness, for an example, whether you're into Egyptian or Egyptology or spiritual consciousness. Then some people want to kind of live in the past, unfortunately. They want to put on African clothing, and then they turn, they got the look down pack on the outside, and they want to turn the Egyptian culture into a literal worship system just like religion. And what do I mean by that? They'll take the deities and venerate them and worship them subconsciously in the same form and fashion that's done in monotheism. That's not the solution. And as I've said before, if we don't take the information, for an example, of ancient Egypt and update it into 2015 and beyond, then the information is useless and pointless. Now, when you go into any of those systems, which is very key and which is very important, when you go into those systems, especially Egypt, there was a high system of magic and alchemy in ancient Egypt that's rarely discussed. Because we're constantly focusing on the historical aspect of Egypt, the intellectual aspect of Egypt, the science and the information, which by all means is great. That needs to be discussed, talked about, and absorbed, but we need to take it to the next level. So, spiritual magic, alchemy, black magic, white magic, Wicca, whatever terms you want to give it, it's all connected, just different degrees of vibration. And if you go back and refer to the 7 principles of Tahuti and study the doctrine of vibration and the doctrine of rhythm, you would understand that principle in itself. It would explain itself. So spiritual magic is key. Spiritual magic is key because if we were all to get together as a collective group and perform some of these rituals, perform some of these mantras, we would literally change the energy grid of the planet. And those who were adverse to it would be exposed for who and what they are, and they wouldn't be able to overcome that type of spiritual energy. This is the stuff they don't want you to know, because you can parade around all day and yell and scream about what you're going to do to the white man. You can profess to be as cultural or as black and cultural as you want. That is not in any shape, form, or fashion a threat to the white man. But if you started practicing your spiritual magic, your rituals, playing your drums, getting in tune with your ancestors and nature, this they fear, because they know this is not something that they can manipulate. They know they can manipulate any religion you claim. So they really couldn't care less if you said you were a black Muslim. They laugh at that. That has no threat to them, because they've already manipulated that dogma and that doctrine. The same goes with any monotheistic religion of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. So their biggest fear is us coming together as a collective group and working these rituals and working this magic. So again, people want solutions, but I find most people don't really want solutions because they don't want to do the work. Most people just want to hear something that makes their ego feel good. They want to hear how black they are and how original they are, and first this and first that, and then they want to hear, you know, how the Caucasian is the reason for all their problems, because it feeds their ego. So it's a feel-good speech that boosts their ego up, but at the end of the day, nothing is getting done. And nobody wants to address that. These are the questions I pose, and I've said if anybody has an issue with it, I'd be more than happy to discuss it with them. And I don't think a lot of people want to discuss it because it takes away from, unfortunately, some people's hustles. And I call it the conscious pimp or the conscious hustle, because some people have an agenda, unfortunately. And I've talked about this before, and I've explained this. Unfortunately, that's the reality of it. So until we can look at the broader spectrum of things and the bigger picture of things and understand how this spiritual consciousness works and how this all ties in, you'll never understand how it'll take you to the next level if you don't do the work. Doing the work means putting the information and the things that you're studying into practice. Let me give you an example. Let's look at a couple of different aspects of this, man. A couple of different aspects of this. Let's take a look at this. 2 minutes. If you were to study for 10, 15 years, or more, whatever, say you read every book there was on ancient Egypt, okay? Say you read every historical fact you needed to know about Egypt, every mystery system, this and that. Okay, other than the fact that you studied and read it and mastered it mentally and know it, if, for an example, you didn't put any of that information into practice, okay, what would be the overall point? Now think about it for a second. If you, for an example, studied some of the ritualistic systems, for an example, let's say Osirian or Osir magic of ancient Egypt, which connects you to your spiritual ancestors in the spiritual realm. They might call it the abode of the dead, but connects you with your spiritual ancestors, that who you can reach and activate that spiritual energy to assist you on many different levels, giving you the answers to questions you need to know, opening pathways and doorways to assist you to getting things done. Now, there's laws that work with magic, and when that, we'll get more in detail with that Thursday. I'm not trying to create a fictitious illusion that this is some hocus pocus shit that you can just do something and it's magically, you know, going to work without putting energy behind it and concentrated thought. There's a whole system that works with this, because we're dealing with science and we're dealing with energy. If we put these systems into place the correct way, things would most definitely get done. Okay? Yeah, you have, different systems of magic. Okay? There's many different magical practices that can be done, for an example, to petition the ancestors to assist you. And the petitioning that you're doing is concentrated mental thought and mental power and mental energy. You have candle magic, you have color magic, you have methods where you can spiritually charge candles, and there's certain rituals you can do as far as with candle magic, petitioning the ancestors. There's deep subconscious mental meditation rituals one can do to go deep into their subconscious to try to reach and make that spiritual connection with the astral realm. There's group rituals that can be done, certain chants and mantras. The list again can go on and on and on and on and on, but nobody is focusing on this because when the topic comes up, even in the conscious community, it becomes taboo. Because this is a topic, I gotta be honest, and if you are honest, you'll be honest with yourself, that most people don't really know about. They don't fully understand it. See, unfortunately what happens, alright, people tend to get into what you call a comfort zone. They get into this little box where they feel comfortable. And if they're forced to come outside of that niche and that box, it kind of creates a problem. Because fear kicks in. And as we said before, fear is the #1 disease that plagues the planet and plagues human beings. So as soon as somebody is taken out of their comfort zone, for an example, problems start to arise. This is what this topic does to some people. It takes them out of their comfort zone. And I'm not just talking about religious people. Now, of course, religious people are spooked out because monotheism has labeled any form of magic or witchcraft, devilishment, according to their mythological character they call the devil. So we're not just talking about religious people. You have spiritually conscious people that don't really understand this subject. Okay? And you can go to many different systems. Now, probably the most prominent that we're familiar with as a whole is the West African system of Ifa, dealing with the Yoruba and dealing with the Orishi. That's probably the most prominent one that we're familiar with. It is a magical system in itself if you're familiar with an extent with Yoruba, Santeria, Ifa, working with the Orishis. If you are familiar with it, there are rituals and there are things that are done to propitiate the ancestors, to bring them down by way of drum rituals, by way of offerings and libations and things of that nature. This is probably what we know modern day to an extent is the closest thing to what we are talking about tonight, spiritual magic. But there's some inconsistencies in it, as you've heard me address in many different classes. You can become, in some of those systems and traditions, a slave to some of those rituals. Because in the watered down, watered version of the Yoruba or the Ifa system called Santeria, there's always some type of offering that needs to be done, some type of cleansing. You need to come back and do this. After you do that, well, that was done, but now you need to come back and do this. So I'm using it just as an example as a whole. I'm not encouraging anybody by all means to become exclusive and just work that system, but it's definitely something you should research. You have different branches of it. Then you deal with Palo Mayembe, different branches of Powell that deal with ancestral worship, which goes to another avenue, another direction, which is a powerful ancestral system that one can work with to propitiate the ancestors. But outside of that, most people don't really have a general understanding of what magic is. They, again, have let the Europeans' definition plague their mind on what that is. And the same individuals that are giving you the definition are the same individuals that practice it. That's the funny thing. They don't believe or advocate the shit that you think that they advocate. And that's part of the plan and part of the trick. So when we hear again this word magic, they've already labeled it as being negative. So one, we have to get out of our minds that when you hear those words, they have anything to do with negative connotations. They're actually powerful systems and tools that if we connect with on the correct level, we can literally alter the grid of this planet. Working the system, and I get these questions all the time. When dealing with voodoo or forms of magic where one tries to cast negative spells or do spiritual work to harm another, let's address that. Because I think when you hear this terminology, most people kind of correlate and relate to that aspect of it, and that's not what it's about. Any true magician or alchemist knows when working magic, especially towards another, if you're trying to harm another and you're not in the right, any great metaphysicist also knows that the laws of nature and karma will come back on you. So you can't try to set out to physically harm somebody just because you're trying to get revenge. Now, there are systems of magic where you can protect yourself, especially if you're in the right and you know somebody is wrongfully trying to harm you. That's a different story. But you can't, just for your own personal gain and needs, try to work magic to harm another. That's not how this system works. Any real magician will tell you and know that. Now, you always, again, like I said, you always have to be in the right when doing magic against another if you feel like you're being harmed. But there's systems to find out if you're actually being harmed. Number two, this is something, again, when dealing with spiritual magic, as far as under the pretext of protecting yourself or sending out energy to harm another, when you're in the right, the magic will always, or the petition of the magic will always go in your favor. That's when you're in the right. Now, if you believe in your mind, and I've talked about this on other things, when dealing with this topic of magic, the only person that can harm you is you. Let me say that again. The only person that can harm you is you. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, what about, I know and I can feel, or some of you might believe that somebody's doing something spiritually to harm me and attack me. That's because you've allowed them to do that. Now, you may not be conscious of it, but you've allowed them to do it. And if you believe in your mind that you are being attacked, guess what's going to happen? You are going to be attacked, because that's part of it, believing. And in those thoughts, believing in the sense not of nonsense, but in those thoughts that you believing that something is happening to you, you're giving life and energy to that situation, and that's what's going to create that situation to manifest itself. So that's why I said nobody can hurt you or harm you unless you allow them to harm you. You give the magic. It's the same thing. If you heard what I said earlier when I was talking about different systems of magic, such as the candle magic, your concentrated thoughts is what charges the magic. So you have to learn the power of thought. This is critical. This is key. This is what most people are not aware of. So if you're thinking those thoughts in your mind, well, what about if I know somebody's harming me? That, again, you're allowing them to harm you. You just need to come to the realization of it. So there's systems to this that you really have to understand and know how it works. Remember, you have physical laws on the physical realm. Then you have spiritual laws. You have spiritual laws that govern humanity and govern life, and they operate on a whole different density plane. You have to understand how all these things work in conjunction with union. And again, it's not simple, and it's not something that happens overnight. It takes intense study. But that if you want to get something out of it, it's what you put into it. Everybody knows that. And this is why we say it's about doing the work. It's deeper than just reading books. Now, another aspect that one needs to be aware of when working spiritual magic, you have to be very in tune with the movement of the planets. You have to be very in tune with the movement of the moon and the sun. You have to know the positioning of the astrological signs, when these planets are rotating and moving, the moon, the sun, etc. You have to know, for an example, when the moon is waxing, getting closer to a full moon, what they call waxing. That means that you do ritualistic magic to draw in energy to get things done. When the moon is waning, you do banishing magic to get rid of or remove certain energy because of the gravitational pull the moon has on our planet. The energy, it pulls and it attracts. So you have to know this, because what you're really working with, and I want to make this clear, that's why I said it's no hocus pocus. What you're really working with when you work true spiritual magic, you're working with the forces of nature, the energy that it produces. Now, if you don't understand that, or understand that, or overstand that, that's why I've said in the past, when you go back into let's use the Yoruba and the Egyptian culture, and you take the deities, all the deities represented an aspect in nature. So you're tapping into the archetype, and you're activating that energy frequency that exists in your DNA. It still all exists and resides inside of you. Nothing exists outside of you. So, for an example, when you go into the Yoruba pantheon, Shango represents or is connected to the fire element. Yemaya and Oshun are connected to the water element. Oya is connected to the wind element. List goes on and on. In Egypt, same thing. As I've said before, you got Geb, who's a symbol of the earth. You have Nut, who represents the sky. You have Tefnut, who represents the water element. Satuk represents the fire element. You get the example. They're an aspect or a representation of energy forces in nature. The word Natiru is a Greek word that has root in the English word nature. So these are nature deities. They symbolically represent an archetype energy that one is able to tap into. This is what one is doing when they're working with spiritual magic. One really has to know, again, the movements of the planet and the energy that's being sent out on the planet at particular times throughout the course of the year. Then you have, obviously, which some know and are aware of, you have the 4 major equinoxes that take place throughout the course of a year. You have winter, spring, summer, fall. And on each one of those transitioning periods of seasons are very strong periods of change and transformation to work spiritual magic. This is what it means when it's said that one needs to get in tune with nature and their ancestors. I'm just throwing all these little tidbits at you to show you these are the solutions. This is what they don't want you to connect with. Okay, so when you're working with these elements and this information, this is something that they fear. But when you say you're a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, a Moor, etc., they don't fear any of that. Because they know at the end of the day it has no bearing. It's only going to take you so far. This is intentional. This is not done by coincidence. Okay? So I think you get a brief idea. We're going to go in more depth this Thursday. But I think this is a good prelude to kind of open you up consciously. But it's going to go in, we're going to go in hard, real hard and heavy on Thursday, getting very in depth, in detail. And this is kind of a precursor to prepare you for that. So again, in short, with all the madness going on, and like I've said before, you're either part of the experiment or you're controlling it. There is a concentrated effort to work on your subconscious right now. There is a concentrated effort to work on your emotions right now. Because remember, you've heard me say a multitude of times, if one can control your emotions, they can get you to do anything they want you to do. This is why they want you to be reactive. They want you to see this stuff on the news, and they want you to get emotional and take to the streets, so that it opens the doorway for them to bring in martial law and establish all other types of systems of indoctrination to control you. So we have to prepare ourselves first with the spiritual artillery. And believe me, by all means, I'm not trying to paint no picture of peace and roses and hugging trees and all that shit. I'm not saying there is no time, or there ever is a time when one needs for physical war. There's always a time and a place for anything, depending on the situation. But what I am trying to say is we need to attack the problems from a whole different methodology. Because if you just become a reactionary being and get emotional and want to take it to the streets, you're leading the masses to self-suicide. That's why I had brought that up earlier. So we have to take the correct preparations and the steps in order for change to come. And again, I've said before, you've heard me say this a bunch of times, people claim they want change. I don't see it. Okay? The people that are screaming they want change, they want somebody else to do it for them. So I'm not just talking about when's the uprising going to be for the physical revolution. When are people going to take that initiative for the mental and the spiritual revolution to another level? So again, it deals with the balance factor of all those combinations that are needed. That's what I'm trying to say. That's what's trying to be conveyed here, and that's what's trying to come across to get people to understand. Anyway, we're going to stop there. I think that gives you enough information for the time being, and for right now. But again, just to make some quick announcements. Tune into the show Awakening Universal Minds. That's going to be this Thursday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on TalkShoe.com. Our special guest will be Brother Panic. and we'll be going in hard on this topic. What is spiritual magic, black magic, witchcraft, Satanism, etc.? We're going to be going in hard on this topic. So we want you to definitely tune in, and we're going to go a little bit more in depth. So that's this Thursday at 9 o'clock. And just have confirmed with Dr. Jewel Pookrum. Dr. Jewel Pookrum will be on the following Thursday, August 13th at 9 o'clock, and we'll be doing a whole special with her on the 12 circuits of the brain. That'll be the following week. Definitely don't miss those shows. That's going to take it to a whole nother level. Now, if you want links to the shows, you can go to the Awakening Universal Minds Facebook page. Just go to Facebook, Awakening Universal Minds. You could also come right here to my page on the Mother Nubia Inc. Google page. All the shows are archived, and the links to all the radio shows are on there. So you can go back and listen to all of them, and you can, stay posted to what's going on with the show. But the show is doing really well. We're reaching people all across the globe. We have listeners as far as Australia, overseas in certain parts of Europe, France, Scotland, London, all throughout the Caribbean, and of course all over the United States. And this is the type of information that we're sharing with people to wake them up. So definitely tune into that show. If you got any questions or comments for me, you can email me at khnum19@gmail.com. That's khnum19@gmail.com. And you can also contact me at that same email address if you are interested in a spiritual consultation or a spiritual reading. They're two different things, and I've explained that. A spiritual consultation is just that. It's a consultation dealing with any topic you want to talk about, or any assistance information you might want to talk about that you need. A reading is more digging in deeper on the spiritual realm of your nature, your character, your ancestral beings that you're working with, and kind of tapping into a whole different aspect of it. So again, you can contact me at the same email address, khnum19@gmail.com. That's about all I got for you. I think that covers it for now, and appreciate everybody watching the videos and the classes and the posts here on YouTube. And we will see you on the next post. This is your brother Beniti Amun Ray. Check it out, and hopefully we see you all on the show this Thursday night, tuned in at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Hotep.